Start of summer just a few weeks away, temperatures will soon heat up.
Outside of Washington, many regions of the U.S. have already experienced significant heat waves, and they're only expected to grow due to climate change. Joining us to continue this conversation is Alonzo Plough, the Chief Science Officer and Vice President of Research, Evaluation, and Learning at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. So, Alonzo, let's start with how dangerous these heat waves can be and how does it stack up to other significant weather events?
Well, heat is the major cause of death related to extreme weather events. And there are more deaths in the United States each year from heat than all of the other climate extreme weather events combined. That means more than the combined from tornadoes, hurricanes, and floods. So the impact of heat is significant. It's one of the major impacts of climate change on health, and it disproportionately affects low-income communities and makes even worse the situations in those low-income and communities of color who already have inequitable burden of other diseases. Heat related to climate change makes their health situation even worse.
Yeah, I was going to say, talk about the risks that some of those communities face and what they are.
Well, it's twofold, and I lived in Seattle, so I can compare the neighborhoods. If neighborhoods that along the lakeside that are part of the Olmsted green space and have lots of trees and those neighborhoods could be on any hot day in Seattle. And I know Seattle's a lot hotter than when I lived there 20 years ago. Those neighborhoods on that part of Seattle could be 20 degrees cooler than those neighborhoods in the Central District, which is not that far away. So there is an inequality in those conditions of those neighborhoods related to green space, tree canopy, that are going to make the heat worse. The other problem is because of just generations of segregation in those neighborhoods and lack of access to ongoing health care and other services. Low-income and communities of color are going to have a higher burden of chronic conditions, asthma, diabetes, and heat waves make those worse. So it compounds existing health inequalities, heat exposure.
So, Alonzo, how can communities prepare and adapt to a changing climate, especially those who are in those communities that are more vulnerable?
Well, I think there's a community activist component of this, and we work around the country with a number of communities that are recognizing that climate change has a disproportionate impact on our communities of color, and raising that as issues for policy changes and more attention from local government. But I think what we have to do is two things: create more equity in our marginalized communities to ongoing health care and health benefits to reduce the prevalence of health inequality, and then special attention to equitable approaches to making sure that we reduce heat islands. If your neighborhood is mainly asphalt and concrete and not green spaces and trees, that's a responsibility of city and local government to resolve. On an individual level, on these heat waves, people need to stay inside, drink, get very hydrated, and we need to change some practices around having our kids playing in the noonday sun. That becomes dangerous even for healthy young people, but particular attention to elders who high impact heat will have a more serious and shorter term impact on their health.
Do you think there's enough interest or initiative in seeing some of those changes through? And if, our viewers are watching at home, is there anything that they can do to try to push for some of those changes?
I think there's not enough, and one of the things we're working on is there's not enough awareness that climate change is having an immediate impact all over the country on health and well-being. Health is the human impact of climate change. It's not about polar bears and ice caps. It's about how extreme weather and climate change is influencing the health across the nation. So better awareness of that, more awareness of the inequality of health impacts on neighborhoods, not being climate fatalists. There are things we can do all around the country, and I know in Seattle and in Washington State around creating better green space. There are things that we can do with low income supports for energy so that people can afford to have and run their air conditioning. But I think particularly for for Seattle, the 20 years ago when I lived there, air conditioning wasn't needed. Now it's going to be a necessity, and we need to see how that can be something that is part of public housing and low-income housing.
Yeah, Alonzo, you had mentioned that you were in the Seattle area about 20 years ago, and I know that you're in New Jersey at the moment, but what are some of the changes for our region that you have seen in that time frame when it comes to the issues that we're talking about today, and how big of a concern is it?
Well, I think it's a huge concern for Seattle. I visit often. I'm still in the faculty at UW School of Public Health. I never needed air conditioning when I lived in Seattle, and I know now when I come and visit that there's been a tremendous change. And given the global situation and the problem with the causal aspects of climate change, which is our global overdependence on fossil fuels, it doesn't look good for lowering this continually rising global temperature. So I think that what needs to happen in Seattle and Washington State is a recognition that this is a serious issue, not a political issue, but one of just the reality of climate change influencing health through extreme weather. And cross-sector, government and private sector, work on trying to make sure that in the short run, we have mitigation activities that have protect us in the neighborhoods, but also in workplaces. I'd want to add that heat is one of the major reasons that workers die on the job. And I think in Washington State, with a large agricultural sector and other businesses, we have to think about workplace safety and heat in a way we haven't thought about that in the past.
Thank you so much, Alonzo, for breaking that down and for spreading awareness on this.
Thank you for having me.
Very important to be aware of, because it could potentially be another really hot summer, at least for a stretch of time. I feel like every summer here in the Pacific Northwest, we get at least 5 days straight where it's just unbearable heat.
And we have seen just even in recent years that Seattle has hit a new record in terms of temperature. What impact climate change is having on that, I'll leave that up to the experts. But I was thinking about his discussion about